The Sony PlayStation was launched in the mid-90s, and while in many ways it was a huge step forward for consoles, when it came to saving your game, it was actually a step backwards. For the previous few console generations, your game progress could be automatically saved on a chip built into the cartridge, and even early CD consoles had the ability to save your game right on the console itself. Unfortunately, the PlayStation started a trend that lasted a few console generations: the need to purchase separate memory cards to save your games on. These often filled up quickly and required people to purchase and keep track of many of them. Now, about 25 years after the original PlayStation's launch, 8-bit mods released a new memory card that can hold an infinite amount of saves and back up your original cards. Let's check out the MemCard Pro. Before we begin, I just want to make sure I set people's expectations correctly. If you're simply looking to play PS1 games on original hardware, you could still find third-party memory cards really cheap that'll absolutely do the trick. Now, you'll probably need a whole bunch of them and they'll fill up really quickly, but the point is, if you're just looking to get started, you don't need to spend a lot of money. Also, if you're gaming on a flat panel, you could always play your PS1 disc on a PS3, which saves your game on the internal hard drive. I never thought that was a great experience, but if you already own a PS3, it's free to try. The MemCard Pro is specifically for people who want to back up their original saves, have multiple virtual memory cards on one device, or use some of its advanced features, which I'll show in a bit. Basically, if you're a casual PS1 gamer, you might not want to spend the money on this, but if you're a PS1 power user or have an XStation, the MemCard Pro is a must-buy. Also, it's compatible with every device that can accept a PS1 memory card, including PlayStation 2 consoles. The only exception are the PS2 Slims, which require an easy mod to add compatibility. All the rest are plug and play and just read it exactly as if it were an original PS1 memory card. Okay, let's check out how to set it up and see what it could do. Setting up the MemCard Pro is about as easy as it gets. As with all new devices, start by downloading the latest firmware files from the main website. Then format any microSD card using SD Formatter. Once it's done, just drag the contents of the downloaded zip file into the root of the microSD card. There's a few things to note about this though. First, you can pretty much use any microSD card since each gigabyte of storage has enough space for approximately 8,000 PS1 memory cards. So getting the cheapest one is fine. You could also just use a microSD card you have lying around, but when I did that, I ran into a bunch of issues, so I definitely wanted to just bring this up. I ended up using a microSD card that came from the DE10 Nano, which is the heart of the MiSTer project, and formatted it once, and then ran into a ton of issues afterwards. I ended up reformatting it, and the issues completely disappeared. So if you're going to use any memory card you have lying around, I strongly suggest formatting it twice with SD card formatter, or if you're a nerd, go into DiskPart, do a full clean partition, and then format it again with SD formatter, and you should be good to go. After formatting and copying the files, just plug everything in, turn on your PlayStation, and wait for the MemCard Pro to update. It'll take a few minutes, but there's no interaction needed. Just turn it on, make sure it starts, and walk away till it's done. As a note, if you're using a PlayStation with an XStation or PS1 Digital installed, make sure to update the firmware on those too. For the PS1D, connect it to your network, check for updates, download, flash, and reboot. Once it's reloaded, wait for the confirmation, then go back and check again to make sure there aren't any more updates. For the XStation, just grab the latest firmware from GitHub and copy it to the OO XStation folder on the SD card. Then boot into the XStation menu, hit triangle for options, and update the firmware there. Both are really easy, and it's good to keep them up to date. The MemCard Pro could be used both with original discs and with optical drive emulators. For original disk usage, it'll automatically create a virtual memory card when you boot your console. Each VMC is 15 blocks with 8 channels per block, so 120 total blocks per VMC. To create and switch to another VMC, simply hit the button to cycle, access the Wi-Fi interface, or use a button combination on the controller. More info on button combos are available in the manual, and I'll show the Wi-Fi use later. A soon-to-be-released firmware update will also allow you to rename each VMC through that Wi-Fi interface. If I were going to use the MemCard Pro with original discs, I'd probably want to find some way to categorize it just to make it easier to remember which VMC is for what set of games. So maybe the first one would be for all of my favorite games that I play all the time, maybe another one would be for side-scrollers, another for shooters, or basically just any way that you could have an easy reference as to which VMC is for which of your discs that you're going to be using. Using the MemCard Pro with an XStation is a much different experience though. As long as your XStation is on the latest version of the firmware, the MemCard Pro will automatically create a VMC for each game and auto-select it when it boots. It'll even display the name of the game right on the VMC after it loads. This feature should be available with other ODEs eventually as well. The other main feature of the MemCard Pro that all PS1 owners should know about is the ability to back up your save games. To back up anything created on the MemCard Pro, simply copy the memory cards directory from the root of the microSD to your PC. Unless you've renamed them through the interface, VMCs will be labeled something generic, and if you're using an XStation, individual game saves will be listed by their serial number. To figure out which folder is which game, I suggest going to psxdatacenter.com and searching the serial number there. You should just be able to search, then scroll past the ads, and the first game listed should be a match. I suggest bookmarking that website though, as you'll probably be referencing it a lot. The MemCard Pro can do more than just back up its own saves. It could also be used to back up saves from existing memory cards. Here's the method I used. Insert an original memory card in one slot, and the MemCard Pro with a fresh VMC in the other. Remember, you could just press a button to toggle to the next card, and a new one is automatically created if one doesn't already exist. You could even do this while the PS1 is already powered on. It'll just look like a card is removed and reinserted when you toggle. Then, just go into the PlayStation or PS2's memory manager and copy the game save you want to back up to the new VMC. Now, power off your console and insert the microSD into your computer. You should see the VMC there with the generic name listed. If you're using original discs, you could just back this save up to your computer. I'd probably drop the full thing into a folder with a game title, or maybe create a zip file with it. Now that it's on your computer, you could share it with other people, or even transfer it back to a regular memory card by using the same procedure. If you're using an XStation, you could do something really cool though. Start by looking up the game's serial number on psxdatacenter.com. Then rename the generic VMC folder to the full serial number. And in the case of the US version of Symphony of the Night, it's SLUS-00067. Next, enter the renamed folder and replace the generic named files inside with the serial number. And just remember to keep the proper dashes at the end in the right order. Now, my MemCard Pro will have my old Symphony of the Night save game on it, and the XStation will automatically see it when I launch the game. Backing up saves this way is both great for use, as well as archiving, since each game will stay in its own folder. And there you go. Here's my save game transferred over from when I beat it with an original disc on a PS2 Slim a few years ago. If you have a ton of memory cards, each with a bunch of different games on them, it'll probably be pretty tedious to extract each game to its own folder, but I honestly think it's worth taking the time to do this if you're using an XStation. There's just too many advantages not to. You get to back up each individual game, you now have an archive that's easy to find for each one, and you never even have to think about memory cards anymore. Every time you load your game, it just automatically loads with it. Now, if you're using original discs, I guess I would use whatever method is easiest. Dump all RPGs into one VMC, or really just do anything that you want to be able to get those saves off of those original cards and backed up to SD, because at the very least you don't have to worry about anything happening to them, and you could always have your saves ready. The MemCard Pro's core functionality of VMCs and individual saves is pretty solid, but there's a bunch of beta features that are currently being introduced that should add some pretty fun extra features to it. The one that I definitely want to mention now is its Wi-Fi control interface. To access it, connect your PC or phone to its Wi-Fi access point to get to the menu. If you'd like, you can continue to connect this way, or just use the interface to connect it to your home Wi-Fi network and access it there. Using this interface will make it much easier to select which VMC you're using with original disks, and it'll let you rename each VMC, as well as much more. I don't want to spend too much time on this now, as I'm sure it'll quickly evolve with new firmware updates, but I definitely want to make people aware it's available and suggest you give it a try. Overall, I really liked the MemCard Pro, and I really think that anybody who uses an XStation or wants an easy way to back up their PlayStation 1 saves should seriously consider picking one up. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you're just someone who occasionally wants to use PS1 discs on original hardware, this probably doesn't justify the cost, but I'd keep it in the back of your mind in case you ever want to upgrade. I do get a lot of people asking if it's compatible with the PlayStation 2, and I want to be clear that this is a memory card that, at least at the moment, only supports PlayStation 1 saves. There's a possibility that a firmware update in the future could add PS2 support, but overall, I think I would buy this with the mindset of it only being a PlayStation 1 memory card. Now, of course, it will work with a PlayStation 2, just only as a PS1 memory card. And once again, a quick reminder that if you use a PS2 Slim, you will need to do a slight hardware modification in order for it to be compatible. But all models of the PS2 Fat, all models of the PS1, and PS1 memory card readers should all work fine with this. So overall, it's an awesome product, and I do hope the team considers making them for other consoles as well, because I'd be willing to bet that people would love to see these for the Dreamcast, for the PS2, and probably for some other consoles as well. Well, that's it for this time. If you liked this video, please consider signing up for any support services, because without your support, videos like this, behind-the-scenes research, and the weekly podcast would never be able to happen. Also, if you'd like to check out that weekly podcast, it's meant to keep people in the loop of everything going on in the retro gaming scene, and is available every Wednesday as a video and everywhere podcasts are found. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.